Hi, everybody. How's it
Welcome,
going?
Jeff.
Jeff.
Thank you for having me back again and having AbelCine serve as a sponsor again this year. Very happy to participate. And we're very lucky to be joined by people who kind of need no introduction. First, we have Robert McLaughlin, who is a member of both the CSC and the ASC. He's from San Francisco originally, born and grew up in Vancouver. We also have Braden Haggerty, who specializes in underwater photography. And they've collaborated together on a couple of, well, I guess a number of projects, but we'll talk about one in particular in the context of a new camera. We wanted to sort of use our time today to expose the colorist community, the colorist mixer community to the Venice 2, which was announced recently by Sony. And they both had a chance to work with the camera. I've had a chance to work with the camera just a little bit, and we will talk about some of the salient features of the new camera, and we will also hear from both Rob and Braden their impressions of what it's like to work with this this new piece of hardware. Something a little different. We wanted to sort of show ourselves and say hi from the camera department. We're the ones who give you all that underexposed footage that you have to save in the color grade. But something interesting about the Venice 2 is, in some ways it can sort of help you guard against that in some cool ways that we'll talk about. But first, I'd like to, if it's cool, to share my screen and roll promo for, I think it's either the 4th or the 8th episode of Lovecraft Country, which was shot by Rob, as well as many other very, very famous episodes of streaming properties that we've all seen, such as very famously the Game of Thrones Red Wedding episode. And others from that series, as well as many others. Same with Braden. She's worked on shows that we've all seen, like Riverdale and Once Upon a Time. Very impressive use of underwater. But without further ado, let's take a quick look at Lovecraft Country, which is streaming on HBO.
Yeah, no, it's just some background on that. It was the first project I shot on Sony Venice 2 years ago, and I love that there's this diverse crowd of colorists on here, because I'm really curious to know what your experience has been with working with the material that comes off of the Venice. And we can get on to how much better I think how much more, if you have used it, how much more you're gonna like working with Venice 2 with the increased dynamic range and what have you. But just having said that, on Lovecraft, I was really knocked out by the gorgeous skin tones I was able to get in, a very just entire gamut of skin tones from extremely dark to alabaster white.
We need to be able to defend ourselves.
You have his blood. Must be the key to finding his pages.
You can't win this game. They're setting up for you to play.
You gonna help us or not?
For us, it's a rat race to the finish. And it's winner takes all.
Hey, hold on!
Great. Thank you very much. Very interesting show, very low key. Did you find it, Rob, challenging to control noise when you were shooting with either the original Venice or the Venice 2 in such low key environment?
The Venice 2 is the huge leap forward, the 8.6K version, at least, which is the one that I used. With Venice 1, with both the projects I did with it, what I tended to do, it was actually quite easy to be shooting very low key with a lot of dark, low and minimize the noise just simply by doing this. Basically an electronic version of what I've been doing since I was shooting 16mm and wanted it to look as good as possible in the telecine. We just overexposed it And what I did was I did work with the camera as a dual base ISO, two different systems, one at 2500 ISO, the other at 800. For anything in the studio, all that dark work we set it at 2500, but then we would rate it at 1250. So we'd be working with that more sensitive base, but then shoot at 1250. And I know, John Joffin, who has used the camera a great deal and done some really gorgeous work with it, does a similar version to that. What he does is he sets it he lights to 1250 and then puts it back to 2500 when he's about to roll, which is kind of, accomplishing much the same thing, I think. So I never felt like I had real noise issues. I think most of us and my colorists on that show, the thing that we were probably most frustrated with was how the highlights just hit a point and then drop right off. I mean, it's game over very suddenly. And the huge advantage that the new one has is that the highlights roll off much less dramatically, much more nicely at the other end. And even at 3200, if you look at the test film we did on hopefully on as good a monitor as you can, you're going to see the blacks are clean as can be. The shadows are incredibly clean. I mean, and what little bit of noise you do get when you're, shooting, Black Velvet or whatever is it's not displeasing at all. And again, if you watch that little promo that we did, Braden and I worked on up in Palm Springs, up in Vancouver. There was one shot where the drone operator accidentally changed the settings on the camera. We didn't know until we were on to the next location. And it's the shot of Braden walking through the woods, and it was grossly underexposed, like very badly underexposed. Fortunately, we were shooting RAW. And what you see in the end is, if you look at it on an HDR monitor really close, you can see a little bit of noise in the tree trunks. But literally, that was probably 3.5, 4 stops under where it should have been exposed, which would have left them really clean. Had that not happened, there wouldn't have been any issue. But and the thing where the camera really shines, and that I wanted to show with the extreme contrast situations that I was putting it in, was just the fantastic dynamic range. And we shot in 3.2 to hold on to as much sky as we could, because we were all like gaga over the amount of fine detail in hot, varied clouds and sky and what have you. And, I've often found myself the last couple of years working in for high-rise buildings where we can't control what's going on outside, and you end up, you got exposed for what's in there. You got a limited amount of light. So being able to hang on to as much in the sky across, in an uncontrollable situation like that is really great. I think that's where I'm really going to enjoy the Venice 2 versus Venice 1.
Great. And just real quick before we hear some impressions from Braden as well, I just wanted to show a little bit of the differences very quickly, just a couple minutes, differences between Venice 1 and Venice 2. So if you ever find yourself on set and are trying to camera spot, then you might want to look out for these. These are shamelessly stolen from John Fowler's exhaustive 68-page rundown of Venice 2. And you can see it looks very much like Venice 1. It's about 14 millimeters longer, but one of the most important things you do see here on the sensor block, which is exchangeable with the 6K sort of front end or sensor block that was available on the existing Venice 1, you have a choice of either that sensor block or a new one that uses a brand new sensor with 8K of resolution for that kind of stunning detail, and especially in wide shots that Rob was talking about. The other sort of interesting thing about it is that you no longer need the R7 RAW recorder to be sort of semi-permanently installed on the back. If you are a kind of person who shoots RAW, that functionality is now integrated into the body itself. So the card slots on the Venice 2 are no longer S/S. They're now the AXS media that we know from the RAW recorder. So it's a little bit longer than Venice 1, but because you don't need the R7 RAW recorder, it's overall, less of a handful, more perhaps lending itself to the kind of work that Braden does. If you wouldn't mind, we'd like to bring Braden in and hear some of her impressions about working with the new camera in her very specialized discipline.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm more from, because I'm a camera operator mostly, it's more of a practical thing for me using the camera. We are seeing the Venice being used up here much more often. So I'd say this year, 90% of the projects I worked on were with the Venice 1. So I expect to see the Venice 2 happening, and I sure hope it does, because the shooting underwater, it's always dark, and there's a lot of DPs don't like to use a motivational life source from underwater, because usually there isn't one unless a vehicle's gone in the water or it's an underwater cave lair thing. So being able to work with Rob mentioned the dual ISOs, which were 500 and 2500. The Venice 2 has taken those up to 800 and 3200. And so that just helps with anything underwater. And we did shoot some underwater in the demo, and it's very dark in BC. We had an overcast day, and it looked really, it looked really nice, actually, just as is. And so that's going to be really nice to work with the Venice like that, because I want underwater to look good, and that will really help it to look better. And then practically, the camera was really great. We were able to take a body that we received at 6 p.m. on a Friday night, and then we're on a ferry at 6 a.m. on the Saturday, and we were able to get that camera to work underwater, steady cam, handheld, tripod, aerials, and drones. So the technically, like physically, the body was easy to, we were able to make it work quickly. Yeah, so it was nice.
Yeah, I think
we had none of the usual prep time that we have for a camera, but because it's so similar to the original one, it's a no-brainer, easy switch over.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of our camera accessories that we have in our rental inventory for Venice 1 are just migrating right over to Venice 2, except for those that depend on a specific length of just the bare body by itself. I mean, I can't tell you how much fun it's going to be to not have to separately update the firmware on the body and the raw recorder, because the body is really easy to update, but the raw recorder was always kind of like a pain, and it had to be done separately or kind of through a convoluted port on the rear of the camera body itself. So that was like probably, I'd say, our number one tech support question on Venice 1 was, you know, I installed the new firmware, but it's, you know, the raw recorder says it's mismatched or whatever. So I think it's a cool idea. You'll eventually be able to you know, have both sensor blocks. So if you don't need the high resolution or the high data rates of the 8K sensor, you'll be able to utilize the 6K sensor for all the same shooting and recording modes that you're familiar with. There's no longer a high frame rate license that's sold with the Venice 2, as there was with the Venice 1. That functionality is included in the body. However, there are still the licenses for full frame mode, which is the sort of VistaVision 3:2 full chip mode, if you will, as well as for anamorphic. But, you know, in particular with anamorphic, you know, we think this is going to be a really great way to utilize what, you know, this workflow that we've seen emerge over the last few years, where you shoot 1-to-1 at the full height of the sensor, you know, with an anamorphic lens that can cover at least, you know, a 24 millimeter high image circle, or, you know, at least a 24 millimeter image circle altogether, and then be able to take that and de-squeeze it to 2-to-1, which is a, you know, again, another popular emerging aspect ratio that we've seen come to the fore kind of over the last 5 or 10 years, starting with House of Cards and shows like that.
I had somebody at Netflix explain to me that the reason 2-to-1's so popular is that they don't like, their research said that apparently something like 40% of people watch streaming on a handheld device, and 240 looks dippy on it, and 16:9 is boring, but but 2-to-1 doesn't look so bad. So
right.
they'll get behind you when you go in. You say you want to shoot some version of widescreen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't even have to have really a conversation if you want to go to 2:1. But my understanding is if you want to go to 2:39 or 2:40 to 1, you do sort of have to convince people to go along with your ideas. Yeah, like I feel like 2:1 is sort of like the new 1.85. 16:9 is the new 4:3, and then we still have scope for those projects that really lend itself to that and take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to try the 65mm large format hot anamorphics that I used last year on this new camera. I think it's going to be incredible. I mean, just
that sounds like an amazing combination. And what's the squeeze factor on those Hawks?
I beg your pardon?
What's the squeeze?
I want to say 1.5 or something like. I can't remember exactly.
Right. Yeah, Panavision came out with their Ultra Vista, sort of full frame anamorphics, which are a similar sort of 1.6 squeeze factor or something along those lines. That'll be really interesting. So the other thing that the camera does, in addition to shooting RAW on board, truly internally, unlike Venice 1 or the F55, it also shoots ProRes, which it downsamples from any sensor recording modes that may be in excess of DCI 4K. And it will do a really nice, so far as I've been able to observe, a really nice, good downscale. I'm not sure what scaling algorithm it's using internally, but it looked really good to my eyes. So you can get 4K ProRes 422 HQ or Quad 4. I believe. I'm not sure if Quad 4 is in the shipping firmware, but it will be added, shortly thereafter. And so now we have a situation that's very much like that of another camera company that we're all familiar with, where you've got RAW and ProRes on board to the same media, not at the same time though. That's a key difference between Venice 1 and Venice 2. Is Venice 1 had the ability to do simultaneous recording with the S/S cards and the codecs supported by that, specifically XAVC, XAVC-I, and those higher bitrate flavors. That codec is not present on this camera, which I thought was a really interesting choice.
Yeah, and the other thing, one of the little side benefits we discovered after a catastrophic mistake was made on set is that having those S/S as redundancy, so you're recording both recorders at the same time and hanging on to the S/S and until you know that everything is safely downloaded, actually saved our butts a couple of times on Lovecraft Country. It was, we were recording 4K on the R7 and or 6K on the R7 and 4K on the S/S, but it did, that kind of, just having that little safety factor is kind of nice, but hopefully everything's solid enough now to not have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll go back to using like the old Pix 240i to grab ProRes out of the monitor out or something like that. But did you notice? I haven't been able to verify this, but did you notice if the dual base ISOs have been bumped up by, I guess, like a third of a stop or so to 800 and 3200. Right. I always felt that the 500 was like a little bit kind of like, I don't know if it was optimistic or maybe arbitrary is the word I'm looking for. And that it was kind of done maybe just to make people think of, Vision 3 500T, 5219. And do you notice a big difference with the new camera in terms of like real sensitivity?
Between 800 3200 or just between the two?
Or just like between like the 500 that we're used to on.
The new one's definitely way more sensitive and much cleaner in every way. It's an all new chip and it's really it's different and it's better. It's no question about it.
I felt that too. Like the fingerprint, it was just so ungodly smooth. It was my feeling. Still very sharp and very resolving, but just had like a stress-free kind of presentation.
Yeah, and I think hopefully what little I've spent in the color suite with the timer who like a lot of colorists, and that's why I'd be interested to hear what these fellows have to say. You know, it's not their first choice, and I think part of it is that, you know, everybody's work is so comfortable working with, you know, what they get out of an Alexa now. Sometimes they're not too excited about working with Sony, although most of them would much rather work with that than one of those other little box cameras we won't mention. But I'd be curious to know what the guys think. Certainly for me, what I'm seeing on set, it's incredible. And my biggest concern was, you know, 6K is one thing. Any camera I'd seen, any 8K over 8K camera I'd seen tested looked very hyper real and brittle and digital, and definitely not flattering to faces. Maybe good for watching a football game or something, but not great. And whatever they've done with this, they've just expanded on what they had going on with their color science and their you know, treating that kind of thing in the Venice, and it's actually gorgeous. I would have no problem shooting close-ups. I'd be very happy with this new camera.
Right, and all the same features like the ART advanced rendering transform subsystem are present on the new camera as well. So
I don't even know what that stuff is.
It's sort of like a super LUT. It's you know, rather than constraining the LUT to a particular number of points, you know, 17, 32, 33, whatever. It's a transform that's actually manipulating if you will, the video card lookup tables in the Venice 2's sort of image processing subsystem. So that flew by. I'm sorry, it was a little bit of a ramble. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'll hand it back over to Jeff.
Before you go, I have a question here.
Oh, please.
Excellent. Yeah. Are there some Venice files available to test and practice grading with that you're aware of? Any of you?
I have files, but I have not been able to look at them because I don't have the beta of Sony RAW Converter. But I bet Rob or Braden does.
Yeah, Jeff, I would love to get you files from the test that we did and see what you do with them, because it really stretched. If you watch the test, you know how extreme the contrast was. We really put it to the test.
If you, I'm going to ask you, are we allowed to give it out to other people? Because ideally you'd give it to somebody from my Colorist. We'll post it online and we'll let, you know, a band of colorists take a shot with it. Is that okay with you?
I don't know if anybody from Sony's on here, but it's their material. I'm sure they'd be happy to have someone, you know, you guys get a hold of it, because it's really going to give you.
We asked both about the availability of the beta of Sony RAW Converter that supports the Venice 2 8K files, and as well as sharing test material. And at this viewing, have not heard back, but it's something that I'm going to. I have to go to Charlotte to train Fox Sports on the Venice 1 they just bought. I'll be back on Wednesday or Thursday, and then I will hopefully have an email from Tanya or someone, Simon, someone at Sony to share.
I'll follow up with you, Jeff, because I miss you, man. You know,
I do too. We used to get to hang out more.
It breaks my heart. Speaking of which, you got AbelCine, you guys are a sponsor. Is there anything you want to mention about AbelCine aside from your great rental? Like, you're the rental place, aside from the brilliant calibration you do on every camera that comes back to make sure it's dead on, locked in focus. Please go ahead.
Sure. I mean, yeah, we're rental, sales, service, support, repair, primarily camera oriented, but we do lots of other things. We're branching out into more production services activities. We have flagship stores in Burbank and in Brooklyn on both coasts, as well as an office in Chicago. And we support customers on the types of productions that Rob and Braden work on all over the world, and have been, you know, very lucky to have founders that have really strong roots in the sort of Maisels Brothers and D.A. Pennebaker tradition of, verite documentary cinematography. And that's allowed us to find avenues to, you know, go down in the digital age that you know, people kind of would never have thought were going to happen. But, you know, we have a lot of institutional knowledge, and we're always ready to share. You can give us a call anytime, even if it's just to ask a technical question or send us an email, reach out. We're always here to help and support both the camera department as well as others. And I'm one of the people there that tends to do more stuff around color and workflow, just because I come from more of a DIT and digital imaging background than specifically the camera department.
And before we turn it over to Waz and Kev, I'm going to ask my panelists here, if you would, go click in the top right corner where it says view. Make sure you're in gallery view so you can see everybody giving you a big applause here. Can I get some big applause for, can get those? There we go.
Yes, a big thank you to Rob and Braden for making themselves available. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Great.
Okay. Bye.
Appreciate it.